A lot of people feared Paul Sykes because of what he was. Once you were in Paul's company, you never knew what kind of mood he was in. If you were within striking distance of him, you had to be on your guard. Anyone who tells you they weren't frightened of him is telling lies. Everybody in Wakefield has a story to tell on Paul Sykes, whether it be that they've had a drink with him or knocked him out. There's quite a few storytellers in our town regarding Paul, I can tell you. Even when Paul had fallen onto hard times and bad days, he was still a strong man. You wouldn't want a left hook of him. My friend Johnny Walker lived on Heralded Road. He's dead now, bless him, but he had a similar background to Paul. Not as with the alcohol, but always imprisoned for fighting or robberies. All stupid stuff. Johnny Walker was a gentleman and everybody knew him. He used to train with me and Chris Campbell in martial arts. Johnny had this huge dog called Turk. It was some type of Anatolian Karabash desert dog. It was a monster of a dog. It was the height of a Great Dane, with the body of a St. Bernard. It was like a fucking lion. I used to train Johnny's dog until it bit me on the forearm. This dog was as ferocious as it was big and so naughty. Johnny couldn't handle it or control it, so he kept it in a massive pen in the back garden. Well, Paul was always going down to Johnny Walker's house asking for lifts, and Johnny sort of became Paul's taxi driver, if you like. One night I was at Johnny's, and Paul had come around with his usual can of special brew in his hand. Cans always looked like miniature versions when Paul had hold of them, because of the size of his hands. And Turk, the dog, was barking. Paul shouted to the dog, "To fucking shut up barking!" Then he told Johnny, "Shut your fucking dog up, or I'll smash its fucking head in." Johnny told Paul to leave it. Paul then launches into one of his speeches, similar to that about the sharks in the Paul Sykes at Large documentary, shouting, "Dogs, there's nowt on 2 legs or 4 legs that could take this fucking sledgehammer here," whilst pointing to his right hand. Then, with that said, Paul got up, still holding his can of special brew in his left hand, took a swing at this beast of a dog with his right hand. The dog retaliated in a heartbeat, biting Paul on his hand, and it must have been painful, as this dog was not letting go. And the more Paul tried to shake it off, the more it bit him. I had to tell Paul that if he stood still, it would let him go. Eventually, I managed to get Turk off Paul, but his hand was a real mess. Turk had punctured it all the way through. A proper dog bite punctures. It doesn't bleed. It goes right in, and it must have been bloody agony for him, I can tell you that. Paul sat down. Now he's not only drinking his special brew, he started on the whiskey for the pain in his hand. He turned to me then and said, "Heppy, you've got a glass jaw and I'll fucking smash it." So that was Paul now starting on me. I just sat and said, "I'm sure you could, Paul, I'm sure you could." There was no use in arguing with him. He was deliberately trying to wind me up, and it seemed to go on a lifetime. But in reality it was only 5 or 10 minutes. It felt like a game of Russian roulette, not knowing if he was going to kick off or not. I was just sat, trying to keep calm, because you never knew what you were going to get with Paul Sykes. It was either a very articulate conversation or a fucking psychopath. I got up and went to my car to go and see if my dog was okay, because I'd left him in the car, and Paul followed me out, just to intimidate me and wind me up further, I think. The dog that I had at the time was only 12 months old, but he was well trained and not afraid of anything. Paul saw my dog and said, "Whoa, see that dog? I'll fucking boot it over the fucking edge." I just stood back saying, "Course you will, Paul." Now because Paul was such a big bloke, he could take 2 strides and he would be on top of you in an instant. So as Paul is shouting about what he's going to do to my dog, before he'd had chance to even finish his sentence, my dog has jumped up and bit him on the hand that he's already been bitten on. I'm shouting, "Stand still, Paul, stand still." The dog had got him good and proper, though. I remember Paul needing surgery on his hand after that, and from that night onwards, his right hand was always set differently to his left. I saw Paul about 2 weeks after that, and he shouted at me, "Oh, you twat. Fair play to you, you did the right thing. That fucking dog, what a tough twat that was." I said, "Sorry about that, Paul," to which he replied, "We all have our ups and downs, and that was a bad day for me."